I'm going to give you an overview of the work that was accomplished by the consortium from the Molecular Engineering of Dispersion Systems, also known as CMEDS. By its very name, we have been working on things at the molecular level and at the nanoscale level. We have, let me give you a little bit of a background of the group. If I were to, it was a large consortium of, started with 22 institutions, but with people moving around, it went to 24 institutions. About 43 investigators altogether. But when you work in teams, there were maybe around 30 projects. They were all connected, and I'll give you an outline of how the different areas that we looked at. But essentially, the group of researchers was made up of chemists, physicists, chemical engineers, and environmental engineers. And the objective of what we tried to do was to look at to develop basic science that can be translated to applications in oil spills. We really wanted to understand how dispersants worked and do long-range work to hopefully develop the next generation of dispersants, try to translate this to industrial practice, and accompanying that, to also work on workforce development, providing opportunities for students, and to do research and to do outreach activities that will be of service to communities in the nation. Okay. All right, so give you a little bit of a background of the technical work. CMED's research has led to over 80 publications. These are all journal publications. And since we are in the business of also trying to develop new kinds of dispersants, there were 5 patent applications, not yet realized into full patents, but provisional applications at this point. Okay, so the whole idea was, can we try to, are there new classes of environmentally benign dispersants that could be developed based on innocuous materials like biopolymers, biosurfactants, and what we call interfacially stabilized particles. What is really happening at the oil-water interface? Can we use new scientific tools to understand these better? And I think a distinctive part of CMED's work was the use of molecular dynamics and chemical physics, chemical simulations of molecules at an oil-water interface to try to understand better what's going on. So with that background, I will give you a little bit of what we've accomplished in the last 3 years. In a broad range, we worked on new dispersant concepts. Tied to that was a little better understanding of the science of current dispersants. And then we had some aspects of fate and transport. And I want to emphasize that what I tried to do was I went out to the entire consortium and asked everyone to prepare a slide that will talk about project objectives and relevance and what their key findings were. And even though I don't have the time to go through all of them, and I have put in names there, the understanding is that these are not things done in isolation. These are projects that there was constant back and forth, small teams together. For example, if we talk about Srini Raghavan's work on these new kinds of emulsions, there were 4 or 5 other investigators who worked with him and who published with him. Okay, so to some degree, in a very broad way, this might be. I've kind of highlighted this as a technology that was developed primarily through Srini Raghavan, where the DOS component of Corexit can be substituted, hopefully, for something like lecithin, which is a phospholipid. It's got obtained from soybeans. It has this chemical structure that is not too dissimilar from DOS. And what Srini has found is that when you mix it in by itself, lecithin is not a very good dispersant, but when you mix it in with some of the other components of Corexit, the non-ionic surfactants, this becomes an extremely good emulsifier and potentially a dispersant. Lecithin phospholipids are entirely innocuous, hopefully. Again, everything depends on the dosage. But the idea here is now to understand how exactly this works. And he's published a paper on this. And to try to translate this. And we've been very grateful to the API who have come forth and have asked Srini whether they can test out these new dispersants in their larger scale tests. So the other thing that I want to bring up is the fact that this is all laboratory-based research with scientists working in the lab entirely. Okay. Another class of dispersants is perhaps headed by the University of South Florida, where they've found that cactus mucilage, again, a biopolymer, is capable of doing a great job in stabilizing emulsion droplets. Another interesting aspect that I'd like to dwell a little bit on is this concept of chemical herding, where when you're out in the ocean and you have oil and it spreads because if you look at this particular thing, unfortunately the projector is not strong enough, I guess, and it's very hard to see these details here. But if you take a drop of oil and you put it on water, you can see that it spreads extremely fast because of the balance of forces that lead to the force along the the water-air direction being greater than the sums that tend to make it contract, so the oil spreads. It's called the spreading pressure concepts. What is done is you apply a herder, which is basically an amphiphile, a surfactant that lowers the water-air surface tension, and as a consequence, it causes this drop to retract and become a thick mass. Over here, what you see is the thickness of the oil increasing with time. Upon application of the herder, what you see here is the herder being applied, and eventually these things become a compact mass. And then if you're out in the ocean, one of the practices is to be able to burn it, or perhaps to pick it up, to use skimming to recover it. Okay. What George Don has done, again in collaboration with others in CMEDS, is to develop these herders, which are now currently siloxane-based herders, which persist in the environment. Okay, he's been able to transition from there to a plant-based, biologically based herder that seems to have the same kind of efficiency as the siloxane-based herders. It's extremely effective, and the primary advantage of this material is that once it biodegrades, and so it's lost in a reasonably short period of time. So there's synthetic chemistry involved and colloidal chemistry involved in trying to understand how these things work and the design of these materials. Then there's the concept of particles at interface, which is very, very relevant to the oil mineral aggregates that have been found. But we take a little bit of a different spin on it. We design particles that will stick to the oil-water interface and stabilize it. And in the process, the hope is that we need much less dispersant, that you can actually prevent oil from coalescing and spreading on the surface. In a sense, you can think of these oil marbles perhaps floating on the surface. They do not spread, and they can be, due to surface convection effects, they can be dispersed over a large range, and they can be photodegraded and so on. This is some work that has primarily come out of Brown University, where Bob Hurt has shown that there are two classes of materials. These are carbon-based materials, carbon black particles, and then these are the clays, and in the extreme, carbon nanosheets, the graphene type materials, which are not practical at this point in time. But clays are, sheet-like clays are very, very easily available. And what he's trying to say is that you can armor droplets against coalescence by having these clays that absorb on the oil-water interface, prevent oil from aggregating and coalescing and spreading, and making it easier to be dispersed or to be picked up. Okay. The bottom line, Agnes Kane was one of the few toxicologists in the consortium. She shows that some of these materials are innocuous to organisms like Artemia franciscana. Extending on this concept, we have used a different kind of clays. These are tubular clays. Okay, the tubular clays, they're known as halloysite, and you can get them in large tonnage quantities. They have the inner lumen can be filled with the surfactant components of Corexit or any other dispersant. Okay, so you have a controlled delivery of these dispersants. The clays stick to the oil-water interface and then release the surfactant cargo, and as you release the surfactant cargo, the droplets become much smaller, and you're able to, and this is an electron micrograph of clay sticking and how they form networks on an oil droplet. The idea is that, again, you can minimize the use of solvent, you can minimize the use of dispersant, you can target dispersant to the oil, and basically improve the efficiency of dispersant use. A very similar concept here is the use of biopolymers that are slightly modified, and here we use things like chitosan and alginates that basically tie up oil droplets. So this is the reverse of dispersion. This is taking oil, tying it up into a compact mass that allows it to be burnt or picked up. All right. I'll then switch to a few examples of underlying science of current dispersants. This is perhaps an interesting observation that has come out from the Carnegie Mellon group. And it's really, this is to understand how the components of Corexit behave. What Lynn Walker and Shelly-Anna at Carnegie Mellon have done is that they take model components of Corexit, in this particular case, the tweens. What they're showing here is that if you add tween and the surface tension, the interfacial tension goes down, and then you remove the tween from the bulk, okay, the traditional concept is that eventually the surfactants will come off the interface because there's always a partitioning between a surfactant in the oil-water interface and in the bulk. And people have been saying in the wide open ocean, where it's infinitely dilute, the surfactant will come off. What Linus and Shelley have shown is that with tween, it really doesn't come off. The interfacial tension drops, and when they rinse it, it doesn't come off at all. The interfacial tension stays down below. And then when you start adding aliquots of DOS, and then you start rinsing it again, and you see that the DOS comes off, but the tween stays at the interface, which is counterintuitive. There are classes of dispersants that become irreversibly absorbed at the oil-water interface. Okay, and this is where the molecular simulations have actually helped. Ron Larson at the University of Michigan has worked in close collaboration with Shelly-Anna and Lynn Walker, and he shows that there's a crowding of the tween at the interface. And because of the molecular structure of the tween, it's not easy for it to come off the interface. All right. In a similar vein, understanding individual components of dispersants, how each of them contribute to lowering the interfacial tension, and how what is the mixture of these things that is extremely efficient. That's work that has been accomplished. Okay, and then the last aspect of this. The last aspect of this that I want to briefly touch about is collaborative work, again, that has been done on fate and transport. This is some work that has shown that when you have a spill and even breaking waves or gas effluents, you create these bubbles that basically create an aerosol from the plume, and the aerosol becomes transported over distances. And K.T. Valsaraj has shown that there's a number of particulate matter, the heavier hydrocarbons. It's kind of intuitive. The heavier hydrocarbons seem to be carried much better at the oil-water interface. So do the components of the dispersants. If you have dispersants in there, at the same time, some of the dispersants also get entrapped in the aerosol droplets. Okay. And I want to, again, bring about that there's a whole range from a very applied perspective. I want to show the range of work that CMETS has done. This is a very applied perspective from the university, from Florida International University, Berin Tansel. She takes mangrove roots, and she shows how they become oiled and how the oil penetrates into them. Understanding photodegradation of dispersants, Carl Linden at the University of Colorado. So you're getting more fundamental. Carl finds that dispersant components also get broken up by the sunlight, and he's doing very, very detailed analysis of the components that have been that are evolved upon photocatalytic degradation, to very, very fundamental aspects of what is going on here in terms of, again, oil mass, the fate and transport of what happens when you have mineral aggregates at an oil-water interface. This is very fundamental work from the University of Massachusetts, showing that when you have particles at an oil-water interface, how the oil detaches off, how strongly bound are the particles, how the shape of the particles affects the ability of particles to stick at an oil-water interface, leads to a better understanding of oil-mineral aggregates, leads to a better understanding of how bioorganisms adsorb or grow biofilm, the marine snow aspects, and so on. And finally, I will end with a very fundamental example from Noshir Pasika that's talking about how oil comes and adsorbs on a surface, and what he's saying is that it depends on the roughness of a surface. If you have a flat surface, there's a lower contact angle for the oil to adsorb, which means oil spreads on a surface. The same surface, if you have a degree of roughness, undulations on the surface, the contact angle becomes much larger. This is a fundamental concept called the Casey-Baxter theory, and he's now examining different surfaces of plants and so on to try to correlate surface roughness to the wettability of oil on these materials. So this is fundamental work. It ranges from new dispersants to understanding current dispersants to fate and transport, all on a molecular scale. And I would like to end by saying that all the investigators in CMEDS have felt that this is a wonderful opportunity that they've had to do the work that they wanted to carry out, basic research on dispersants and oil spill remediation. And we're all very grateful to GOMRI for this opportunity. Thank you very much.